Oh, the candle at 3 ends
Recording
right
started?
now, isn't he?
Oh, we are recording.
Oh,
Okay. We're live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third episode of the Kingsnake Chronicles. My goodness, sorry, we just jumped in live. Tonight's a big night. We've got 3 different Herpetoculture Networks shows being recorded. That's going to be Arachnids, Flippin' 10, and tonight's show, Kingsnake Chronicles, which is kind of an offshoot of the Corn Stars.
kind of the most important one,
It's kind of,
I think it's better.
it is probably, I'm humble, right? So I don't want to say that, but it is the
I'll
most
say it.
watched, most reviewed show. Ellen has talked to us about a potential appearance, so
I know.
take that as you will. I am Chris Painshop, as always, your host, I guess. The other host, my wonderful friend. I like to think of this as the
Here we go.
maybe our genuine trek for the one podcast network to rule them all. And this is my wonderful Frodo of Floridiana, Harry Claiborne. And I once again
They
pronounce the
just get
R.
better
It's
and better.
Claiborne. But yeah, so me and Harry are super excited for our guest. We're going to go over a few things before we introduce and talk with him. But it's Dr. Zac Loughman, who so many of us know and love listening to. So we're going to have a great episode. As always, this podcast is brought to you by Black Box Cages.
There we go.
One of the best industry fabricators for racks and cages, and they do a wonderful job. You hear us harp about it all the time. I'm constantly impressed when I'm using their equipment. It is a treat to have a partner that builds and designs wonderful equipment. Again, huge fan of theirs, and I like to think that they're a fan of ours. So that's a great thing. Also brought to you by Silent Hill Reptiles. Check them out. They're on Morph Market, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere you like to look for corn snakes. JT and Bindi are out there doing the Lord's work when it comes to beautiful animals. They've curated a very unique collection, and they've really done a good job with their selective breeding projects and their morph projects. I know JT produced some amazing things this year. He had one of these killer Tessera outcross splotchy things that I just wish I should have bought it, but here we are. But yeah, give them a check out. I think they took a small little break here at the end of summer, but they'll be back in full force posting animals, and they're going to be breeding again soon because they do start their breeding season early. Also brought to you by Fulvius Apparel. Check it out. Wearing my Fulvius shirt right here. I think Harry's got a Fulvius shirt on as well.
Yeah, wrong species, but we're going to roll with it.
I'm wearing a Panther Ophius shirt, so.
Shun this man.
But yeah, so, Justin's out constantly making great new designs. I know he's got some new arachnid designs he's come out with, a really cool newt one that he just came out with. And also, he has told me personally multiple times he loves making coffee mugs, so be sure to get some of those neat coffee mugs. But yeah, again, it's a big night. We're really excited. We're all praying for Justin's bandwidth to not crash and all of this content that we're making to be lost forever to the internet.
Is it all hanging by a thread on that right now?
Yeah, but we've at least got 3 minutes of me pontificating like an idiot, saying what we are going to try to do. Me and Harry usually like to give you a little update. It's been a while between episodes. Harry is now a proven breeder, and we're dealing with that.
That's right.
That's part of life.
Dealing with it. That's an excellent way of putting it.
It is a adventure that we have all been on, and it is a lovely one.
Tired.
How are you doing, Harry?
Oh man, we are in the middle of a sleep regression, which nobody told me about, for both father and daughter. So yeah, we're they say every time they learn a new skill, it is accompanied by a sleep regression. I guess as their brain is sort of solidifying how to do whatever that new thing is, and the current new thing is scream when they are not being held.
Oh man!
So that is accompanying less sleep. So we're doing good. Now she's getting cuter every day. The rest of that we can deal. So
yeah, Harry, all your Daytona pickups going good?
Yes, very much so. Everything's eaten. Everything's a lot of it's still in quarantine. Even a few of those things I got right before, like those Sand Kings. I really wanted to pull one in here. One was about to shed, but it didn't quite do it. I was planning on brandishing one of those and undulating before the show, but it's just they're both kind of dingy looking right now. They need a shed, so
yeah,
y'all will be spared that.
Well, for me, all my Daytona stuff's going good. Everybody's eating. I hatched out the rest of my eggs. A lot of stuff's already gotten shipped off. I did end up getting some Boy Scout Road F1 Mexican hognose. Did get them to hatch. They're really, really cool. I am shocked at how small they are
Tiny.
in comparison to a Western hog. And then they eat, and it's like, where did the pinky go? Because you pooped it out in 3 days, and it doesn't even look like you have a lump. So that's pretty cool. I have one consistently eating, which is great. The other one's being a tepid little bastard, but he will eventually catch on. And I actually already shipped one out to our good friend Dustin Grun. So hoping that goes in a neat direction. We have a fun little project we're going to try out. But yeah, I mean, it's
Those
good.
things are neat.
I do have one little personal update. It has taken me 10 years. I have talked about this on almost every damn podcast I've ever been on. But I now have a trio of Debbie.
That's done.
Yeah. So I have original Vivid Line Los Mimbres locality Durango mountain pine snakes. I have a male and a female that are natural pattern het hypo, and I did get a female hypo. So really excited. The adults to my snakes were born in 2003. So if you do the math and you start thinking about that, that is a pretty amazing feat that these were breeding still. I have pictures of them. They're beautifully healthy. I know they're a slower growing and a slower species, but it's neat to have some of that original founding stock that came in, and they are gorgeous. So it took me a long time to actually get them in after purchase. The gentleman was an absolute sweetheart, provided me with more information than I ever could have even imagined. And I finally get to have a shot at them. I would love to still pick up another male. I think that anytime you're going into something like that, you want to have a 2.2. I got everything he had available at the time. In fact, I know a couple other people that have posted today that they got Debbie's, and I'm like, hey, did you get these from this person? And they were like, yeah, I sure did. How do you know? And I was like, because I bought I bought the last male, and then I got my pick of females. So super excited. Just as a fan of Jani, being able to get the other side of the genus is, or I guess the genus and species. The species is it's very exciting. But we are not here tonight to talk about Pitchovis, regardless of how amazing they are and how much I'll probably bring it up again before the end of the show.
Lamprepeltis jani.
Today is Lamprepeltis jani. Today we are talking about Lamprepeltis, specifically Getula, and specifically the Getula kind of east of Texas. Some of them are in Texas that we're going to talk about. And we have Dr. Zac Loughman with us. Dr. Loughman, you don't have to introduce yourself on this show. You don't need to tell us how you got here.
I don't
that's
want
kind
to.
of the, I've
done that a
you've
lot.
done that enough. You're a good friend of all of ours. You've been a great friend. But even beyond that, you've been an inspiration to all of us. I know you're working on your second book right now. Your first book produced a lot of success. How are you doing? How is your season going, Zac?
I'm doing well. This week's a little rough, and in Professor Land, we survive by these horrible things called grants. So we write these 10-page papers. Remember when you were in school and you'd write a paper and all you got was grade?
Mm-hmm.
If I write the right paper, I get $250,000.
Ooh, yeah.
So there's a little bit more of an incentive to do a good job. So, and I get to pay for a student or two, and get travel money to go to cool places. So, but I have a grant that's due tomorrow, and I've been working on it for a week. And you guys were the cherry on top for me having 7 days of absolute hell writing about something I shouldn't be writing about. It's on a snail.
Ooh,
yeah, that's right. Exciting.
Oh boy,
it is actually strangely exciting. But it's a snail in a cave, and no one studied it. And there's a student that wants to join my lab, but we got to get her funding. So
okay.
So I've learned a lot about snails. I didn't know I was going to know this much about snails a week ago, but I know a lot more about snails than I thought I would. So anyway,
getting that snail money.
Yeah,
getting that snail money.
On next week's show, Snails to Stogies, we'll have you back on, and we'll talk about the cave dwelling razor. I'm assuming it's called.
Yep. So if I'm a little burnt tonight recording, that's why. But
no,
that also means that I'm just going to rip, so we don't know where the hell this is going to go.
Yeah. Well, we
That's
are
good.
very, very thankful to have you break off a little bit of your time from that
Sure.
to discuss the superior Lamprey-Peltis.
Yes, I agree with this wholeheartedly. I've now listened to 2 Mountain King episodes, and I am ready to talk about a real Kingsnake now. So, yeah.
You and me
well,
both.
As far as I would assume ophiophagus snakes go, the snakes that we're going to be talking about tonight are the kings,
Yeah.
at least in North America, with the exception of indigos.
Mhm.
Dr. Loughman, we're talking about this kind of eastern complex of
Yes.
Getula, which has been broken up, and we're going to get into taxonomy in a little bit. I have heard, there's a little show that you do. It's called Cluebird and Clueboid Radio.
Yeah.
And it's
something.
pretty okay. It's pretty good.
Mhm.
And I would actually tell everybody before you finish this episode to go listen to all of their episodes. But you really have talked quite a bit about this kind of section of Getula. Why? Well, that's a big open-ended question, and
Yeah.
you may be a little burnt out. And it may be a lot of words, but why that one for you?
Well, so I like animals. At the university in our Zoosci major, we kind of code this one might rip your face off with. It has personality. And so, like, I'm not right here. That glass you heard are Nerodia Clark guys. So I keep Nerodia, and they're not exactly known for, pleasant attitudes.
Violence.
I have the false water cobras that I'm known for that have a feeding response that would put a Drymarkin to shame. I have Drymarkin, like right over here. There's 2 Texas indigos, an Eastern indigo. So I just like these I like snakes that want to eat, and we'll talk about it because they don't always want to eat. There's a time in their life where they choose death over eating, which is when they hatch out of the damn eggs. But outside of that, their feeding response is off the chain, which means that they're easy to keep. And when I get home at the end of a day and I'm working in the snake room, I used to like a challenge. And it's not that these aren't challenging, because there's an element, especially getting the babies to eat. Outer Banks king snakes, I will challenge anybody that they are just like Alterna to get those little bastards. I have 21 of them upstairs right now, and none of them have taken a pink yet. They were born in July.
Some of yours from last year, secondhand from Phil Wolf, and they blissfully are past that. So,
yes, yeah. When they get past it, they're great. And I was listening to the alternate episode, and it sounds like that. But I also like snakes that are kind of thuggish, for lack of a better word. Like they just kind of have this brute phenotype to them.
Meathead
there's
personality.
Like nothing finesse about a Getula King at all. And that's like my vibe. I like that in an animal. There's dog in that fight, and they're gonna literally, like, I had a great example. We all know that they're ophiophagus and they eat snakes. I had a Brooks King get loose in this room that I'm recording in right now, and it went over to the rack and popped the tub like they do when they get out. It then proceeded to go into the tub and eat the freaking hognose snake that lived in there. And that's how I found it, is I pulled open the tub and it was sitting in there with half the hog down its throat. So to some people, they would be like, hell no.
Yeah.
But to me, it's beautiful. It's like a beautiful angelic beast of absolute insanity. And that's what it is for me. And I also like the fact that I can find them. So the Getula I live in the East. I'm in West Virginia. We actually have Getula historically in West Virginia, but one hasn't been found here since the 60s.
Oh, wow.
But if I hop in a car, 5 hours from me, there's Eastern or Chain Kings, whatever you want to call them. I go to Florida periodically. I can find Floridana. So the other thing I love about these animals is that you can go find them. And given that I do just as much herping as keeping, that's cool. And for me, what's interesting about these damn things is I found Florida king snakes before I found Eastern king snakes. I just got my lifer Eastern this April in Chesapeake, Virginia, and it was it was the Chesapeake phenotype of Easterns. It's exactly what this thing looked like the animal I had at home, which was pretty badass. So
That's cool.
they're a bit of a challenge in some places to find, and in other places they can be the most common snake. It just matters where you're at. But I like that it's not like Alterna where you put in 200 hours and you might see one. I had that when I was 20 and 30. I'm in my mid 40s now. I don't need that. If I go out looking for something, I want to find it. That's it.
You see, that's what it's like for me here. Our local Getula are Apalachicola Kings. So I relate very strongly to the put in 200 hours and get bupkis part of it.
No, I would lose my damn mind if I found a Blotch King or a Mean's Eye or whatever the hell we want to call them. We can talk about that here in a minute.
Yeah, I think that's probably where.
But that's it for me.
And just to recap on that, you have like a handful of these animals, right?
Yeah. I don't like to count, but I did, and I'm just over 100. And lots of pairs. And then I got into the locality thing. So I realized that I wanted to do localities, but I didn't like the species that most people do localities with.
Yeah.
And I'm not insane about it. I like locality at the county level. So like a Pinellas King, a Pasco County King. Like that's what I like. Or Chesapeake Easterns, which just means a wide-banded Eastern from around Virginia Beach. Like that's what I like at the locality level. And being a nerdy scientist, when I go out and look at these animals, I'm looking at phenotypic variation at a geographic level, and that is what we're doing when we're doing locality keeping. So it plays to my nerddom well. And I had pretty much had it with Asian rat snakes. I was kind of over them, and I was moving them out, and I traded for some Brooks Kings, which weren't locality. They're actually hobby Brooks Kings. That's what we call them because they're damn near white. But I got those things in, and they were just easy. Yeah. And I was kind of like, this is nice. And then I've got humidity levels here, and the Getula complex comes from a land of humidity. So like my Trans-Pecos rat snakes, which I just bought to die, like that's why I bought those, to watch them get wet and die.
I know that
these things came here and just thrived because my house, with our background Appalachian humidity that never goes away, it was perfect for them. So, got the locality thing. They're easy to keep, but they're still challenging getting some of the babies to go. I could keep them in a myriad of ways. That's the other thing. I keep these things in every way you can keep a snake. I have them in tubs. I have them in planted vivaria. I have them in vivaria with mulch and a hide in there. I literally run the gamut with my keeping strategy. And that's the other thing. Given that I have herpetocultural ADHD, I can pretty much do any herpetological or herpetocultural technique and then throw a Kingsnake in there and get some kind of reward out of it. So to me, they're the total package. And then I don't understand why, but in recent memory, I've gone all the way around the world with my snake keeping, and I've come back to the US, and I think this is where I'm just going to stay. I don't know why.
It seems to be a natural progression.
I can have anything I want.
Yeah.
And up at the school, and we just have a bunch of North American and South American snakes and some Australasian pythons and ball pythons. That's it. Yeah. So I don't know if that was a long-winded answer, but there you go.
That was a great answer.
No, that's perfect. There's something to be said. We kind of do that naturally as hobbyists that are into the natural animals and natural forms of animals. Somehow we always end up coming back to North America.
Yeah, it's goofy, but it's true.
Yeah, then it's like, oh man, what about those mole kings? And then you stop and you're like, oh yeah, there's this whole other complex that everybody forgets about.
Oh no, mole kings are next. They are. Yeah, I just keep doing this. Whenever I see one.
I saw a pair the other day and had to do that exact thing.
No, Caligasser and Rombo, whatever. I can never remember the Florida species. Rombo maculata or something like that.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah, the whole Caligaster complex it's another. I hope we can find somebody to come on to talk about them. They're really
I was thinking
interesting.
about that. Yeah.
They're super neat. They're like kind of like a rat snake almost phenotypically, but they have
they're like
Kingsnake
that steel
tendencies.
cable. If you ever hold one, they're just a
insanely
muscle.
strong.
Yes, no, they are like Getula Kings are strong, but
Yeah.
I feel like a Caligaster. I've caught a couple of them. It's like Jesus, this thing is next level. So
it's made to kill rabbits.
Yes.
So when we talk about the Getula complex, this has meant different things, and I'll kind of tell you what it meant to me at one time, and maybe you can tell us what it means now. When I back in the day thought of the Getula complex, it started with California kingsnakes on the West Coast. It included a couple of subspecies and variants in there, the Umensis, the Conjuncta. Then it goes to Arizona, where there's this really neat conjunction point where you have the Mexican black kingsnake, and I never remember the scientific name of that one.
Negrita.
Okay. And then it goes to Splendida, and then Splendida starts to integrate with Holbrooki. Holbrooki starts to integrate with Nigra, which is the eastern black kingsnake, which may or may not exist anymore. That starts to integrate with, I believe, what was Getula, which was the eastern kingsnake, and I may be wrong on that scientific name. And then that had some integration variants and kind of split as it went down to the Georgia and the Florida Panhandle, which would be like your Meansai. And then if it went east, you would have your Brooksai and then your Floridiana. I believe there's been some other subspecies named in there. I think the OBXs were
Williams Eye. Is it Williams Eye, or did I just pull that out of my
Williams Eye is the golf hammock rat snake.
That's what it. Don't listen to me.
It starts with an S,
steps, which was the Outer Banks king.
Yeah.
There you
okay.
Go.
Yeah.
Which edit that out, Smitty.
Thing, to say out loud. So
yeah.
But so,
if we start at Holbrooki, which is still a species,
well, this is where we get.
Here we go.
I know you love your taxonomy.
Yeah.
So
the name of this episode is Taxonomy is Fake.
Yeah. Basically, to make a very long story short, until we had DNA and could actually look at the DNA, everything was based off of pattern. And there was this guy by the name of Blaney, and I love this little bit of history because West Virginia, doesn't have many claims to fame herpetologically. But Blaney, when he did all his Kingsnake revisionary work, was based at West Virginia State University, which is just down the road from me. So anyway, Blaney kind of tackled all the noise taxonomically with all the Kingsnakes. And what Blaney realized very quickly was that Easterns and Florida Kings, and at the time, well, he got rid of Goinai. He didn't recognize Goinai. Their patterns were similar. And then everybody out west was similar. And he made a break. And he basically said that there is the Getula clade, which is east of the Mississippi River and then south down to the Gulf. You find it in the Apalachicola region. And then there was the Holbrooki clade, which is basically the Desert King, Negrita, California, and Nigra. And then he did recognize I hate this one. Umensis. I have four of them behind me right now.
And Conjuncta got squashed, and a couple of the others,
And when they looked at that, they used morphology, like head structure, and what we call scutellation, which is how the scales are arranged and the coloration on the scales and such. And so that kind of big split of the Holbrooki group and the Getula group, Getula to the east, Holbrooki to the west, that was pretty much the gold standard from 1977 all the way until the early 2000s. And that's when this guy named Kenneth Crisco, who did his PhD at the University of Florida on kingsnakes, so he's published a lot of papers. He took the reins, and then he started doing DNA work. And when they did DNA work, the DNA work consistently shows that there's this Western group of kings and this Eastern group of kings that are part of this big Getula complex. And in 2006, Crisco and Judd described Meansai. And when they described Meansai, they basically said that there's scales that separate this animal. The color pattern separates this animal. And at the time, they did a very, by today's standards, extremely elementary, but at the time, revolutionary genetic analysis that just it showed that the Getula group to the north in Florida and the northern part of Florida, Eastern Kings, one thing, Floridana in the peninsula, one thing, and then sandwiched between the Apalachicola River and the other river I cannot say, it starts with an O, what is it here?
Oclockney.
Oclockney, there we go. And that little area of Lawrence and Franklin and Liberty County, that's where Means Eye was. And so at the time, Means Eye's been controversial since it was described.
Yeah.
So he basically said we all know this in herpetoculture land, but if you don't, the kind of non-patterned, speckled looking form of what we would all call blotch king up to that moment was its own species. And then they said what was a blotch king is an intergrade between that and a Getula. Okay. And there is some zoogeography. I mean, if you've been to Liberty County, it's really trippy. I was there last year on my spring break trip, and there are bluffs, little hills. It's where the Torreya is and the Torreya pines and all that kind of good stuff. And sandwiched in the midst of that is Means Eye. So zoogeographically, there is something that could, elevate that thing. And so along comes another paper, and Pyron comes in, and Burbrink, everybody's favorite Burbrink, infamous for the rat snake debacle, as some view it. And they came in and basically just used a single gene, looked at everything, and they elevated all these subspecies to species level. They did the opposite of what they did with the rat snakes. With the rat snakes, it was like, doom, gone. With Burbrink's Getula paper, it was like, you're all species now. But when he did that, by looking at one gene, what they ended up doing is they took the Florida king snakes and the Eastern king snakes, and they showed with their analyses, there's no difference genetically. So they're all one thing. So when that paper came out, which I got my cheat sheet, 2009, 6 years after Crisco's paper, they basically were like, yeah, it's a Getula, Lampropeltis getula, no subspecies. If you catch it in Maryland, it's a Lampropeltis getula. If you catch it in the cane fields of Florida, it's a Lampropeltis getula. If you catch it in Franklin County, Florida, they're all the same thing. They just have this phenotypic variation. And Crisco came in later in 2017 with a whole bunch of authors, and they looked at 3 genes and morphology, and they did this thing called ecological niche modeling. And basically, you don't have to know what that means. All I want people listening to this to know is they didn't do this. They did not roll in and be like, you're different. I'm going to name you. Because I think that's what people think scientists do. Like, they had many lines of evidence, multiple lines of evidence that showed Means Eye could carry some weight. And what they also did is with their lines of evidence, it showed there's a Getula, there's a Floridana, there's a Means Eye, but there's no subspecies. And then you just have this big zone of integration. And a lot of people have problems when you're dealing with species, when you've got intergrades.
Which is a huge thing with king snakes.
Yeah, of what a species is matters. Because if you're like old school, what we taught people in high school, what I was taught in the 90s, sure, they're subspecies. If you stay up with this stuff, we now know things hybridize all the time. You all have Neanderthal DNA in you, but we don't recognize Neanderthals as a separate, as a subspecies of human. They are a separate taxa. So with me, I like this approach, and this is the approach that's in this book, Amphibians and Reptiles of Florida. It's a good one. And Crisco did it. So I currently, at the risk of pissing a lot of people off, and you don't have to agree with me because it's America. We have free will. But I think that there's some legitimacy to Means Eye. I think there's some, and I like it being just Lampropeltis getula, Lampropeltis floridana, Lampropeltis Means Eye. And then the other thing that Crisco did, which is really weird, is in that Pyron paper, they didn't look at Nigrita. They just completely forgot it existed. But they put in there, it's a California king snake. So they subsumed that up into California. And what's really weird is if you've ever gone out west, you know that the Splendida, the desert kings, as you go south of Tucson, you can get into that area where you will inevitably start picking up a desert king and a Nigrita right next, like a black king snake and a desert king snake on the same road.
Yeah.
Well, Crisco looked at that and basically was like, yep, Nigrita, it's a species. And so they elevated that. And so right now, if you go with that hypothesis, then all of these things that were subspecies are now species. And like one thing I want to throw out there, California king snakes, right? Many people have California king snakes. I have, they're the bane of my existence. I don't know why, but Cali Kings, the easiest one to keep is the one that I have the hardest time with. Okay? I think it's an East Coast thing because people on the East have a hard time with them and people out West don't. So I don't know if it's our human, I don't know what the hell it is. But I also know that there's people like John Lohman, who just breeds the shit out of Cali Kings and his business partner. So I don't know what the hell's going on. But anyway, if you look at a California king snake and you look at a Florida king snake, those are not the same animal. I'm sorry. No. They're just not. So saying that they're all the same subspecies, I just think that's total bullshit. So that's where, that's my, and we've got the evidence to kind of point towards it. Plus there's a million places where you could get a gene break, like a real legitimate gene break. So this idea that we look at them as species with intergrade zones, a lot of people don't like that. They want their species to be crisp and have nice, well-defined borders. But Mama Nature didn't get that memo. So
they don't draw lines on borders or. Turns out them snakes don't look at that range map. They just,
they don't. They don't give a shit. They truly do not care.
Yeah.
So anyway,
and that's why kind of you look at old school mentality on some of this stuff. You get a lot of these very integrated looking animals that people are like, no, these are a subspecies, and it's like, well, probably not, right? Like there's definitely, I do find that kind of interesting. Negrita is kind of a weird one. It's like the more south it goes, you get more black animals. Also, the animals we have in the hobby are not a very good representation of what's found in the wild. Right? They don't find solid black. I'm sure there are some that are found, but for the most part, they're not solid black Mexican black king snakes, right? There's some pattern. A lot of them have the Splendida pattern on them. So I think that's pretty. So when we say that this is a mess, it is in fact a mess.
It is in fact a mess. Yes.
So when we're talking about means eye, and this is just one thing I want to clarify, where does Goinai come from?
Okay. Goinai was around in the early part of the 1900s. I don't remember who described Goinai. When the hell was that done? It was done before, like in the 1940s, I think, is when Goinai was elevated or described. And basically, what Goinai is it's the Getula and the Getula, the means eye, and some argue a little bit of Floridana, and one great big like swirl, which is what creates the blotches. The blotches are really cool, by the way. Yeah. I have a lot of Goinai. But Goinai are essentially an integrate population as we recognize them.
Okay.
And another thing, there's nothing wrong with calling those snakes Goinai, by the way. In herpetoculture, we could call them, I call them Goinai.
Sure.
I say I have Goinai and I have means eye. But if I was talking to a herpetologist, I wouldn't say Goinai. But to me, Goinai just simply means that kind of blotched phenotype, if that makes sense.
No,
when you lose that and you got more of the speckly, patternless means eye look, that's a means eye. And means eye have to come from Franklin in Liberty County. So, that's it. You have thoughts on that, Harry, since you live with them?
Yeah.
No, I'll drink to that. They've been the bane of my existence to actually find, but Lord knows I've spent a lot of time trying. Had to buy some so I wouldn't go nuts, so I could come home and take them out when I got my ass kicked.
After you don't find them?
Yes, lots and lots.
That's what I was doing with Easterns.
While I was picking up brake pads, going back out again. But
I had a birder friend go down to Apalachicola, and this is the way it always is. So damn birders.
Yep.
And they just sent me a picture. I found a snake. It was the most perfect Goinai ever. Like as big around as my wrist, and I just wanted to tell them to just go drive off the cliff. Like
my cousin found one of the most beautiful Leon County intergrades while out turkey hunting, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" That was 6 years ago, maybe 5, and I've been destroying my vehicle in those woods ever since. And nope.
So in these back and forths where we have that
Yes.
kind of integrated zone of
Mhm.
Holbrook to Getula. Was Niagara kept or no?
Niagara is north of all of this.
Okay, so the Kentucky kind of area.
It comes
Okay.
down into North Georgia. I think it's
Yeah.
in northern Alabama.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that you get them. Like the last place where you have a really that people would know just right off the top is Chattanooga, Tennessee, that area. You get Niagara in there, and then you go like you drive an hour and a half south, and I think that you're into Getula land. So,
Okay. Interesting. Yeah,
And you have
these
this
are
real beautiful Holbrook Getula intergrades a little bit south and to the west of there, right? Some of my favorite snakes out of all of them.
Yes.
No one talks about Niagara.
Yeah.
I can't keep Niagara. West Virginia has these rules where we're now allowed to keep native species if they don't have the phenotype of the native snake. That's why I can keep the Chesapeake Easterns, because they've got that really wide band, and every Eastern found in West Virginia has a very thin band. So I talked it over with
Stick
people,
it
and
to
they're like,
them,
"Yeah, you
man."
can have those." I was like, "All right, cool." Can't sell them, so if I ever make them, I'm trading them or just giving them away. You know what I mean? But Niagara, man, that was the first king I caught. Actually, was a black kingsnake,
Nice.
and it was also the first king I bred accidentally.
Okay.
I brought them home to take pictures, and then I looked in the bag, and they were freaking locked up. And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." So then I took the male, let him go, kept the female till she dropped the clutch, let her go, and then I hatched the eggs and let them go. It was a lot of letting go, but anyway.
I had a trio for a while, and they were Kentucky locality, but they were old. They were very, very long lineage, and they weren't county specific. They were just Kentucky. Beautiful, beautiful snakes. They had that really cool kind of thin white under them. It's kind of funny. They look just like a Brawley, California, California king snake.
Yep.
And boy, were they hungry. Those were some hungry hippos. And the first year I bred them, I had a trio. I only ever bred one female at a time, just because I didn't want to make a whole bunch of them. The first year, I had limited to decent success getting the babies to feed. They were kind of tough. My second year breeding them, and this is while I'm breeding Alterna, I did not get a single one to eat. They were absolute flipping nightmares. I gave them all away, not feeding, and I'm sure I gave them to some buddies that would deal with their shenanigans. And then my third year breeding them, the female turned around and ate all the eggs. Like these snakes will do. But they were really neat. Those actually ended up one of my apocalyptic cleansings of the reptile collection. Those went to Bill Bradley, and I do believe he still has them.
Oh, nice.
They're really pretty. Kind of miss them. We miss them all though. And so they are not. It's almost like they don't do well with scented food, and we'll get to babies later because I've got California. We're not going to talk about California king snakes, but I have a clutch of conjuncta that all ate out of the egg, no problem. I usually start my conjuncta on live just because I know they're going to eat, and then they went to frozen thaw second meal. Now they've had 5-6 meals, and then I have some Palos Verdes Newport morph, some F1s from Palos Verdes, California, and they throw me some stripes or some bands, which is cool. So I have some really these cool brown with yellow bands, and of the 5 of them, all 5 of them have not eaten yet.
Yes.
And it's so stupid because it's like, I know what I'm doing. Then I have a fridge full of things to scent. Now, I have not started trying to scent with them. I've only done live and frozen thawed. And the reason for that is they're plump and fat. And I don't want to start having to do the weird things. Go ahead, Ari.
I take my time before I move from like boiled and, just like maybe washed even before I actually go to all the external scenting stuff. Like you're gonna start getting hungry before I do that with most of the things that I have.
The only snakes I don't do that with are Alterna. When I'm ready to start feeding Alterna, I know that step 1 is this, step 2 is this, step 3 is this.
Yeah.
But I think we're a little bit more. I feel like Alterna are difficult, and this can be my little spiel on Alterna because you did bring that up and kind of talked about the difficulties in feeding. I think they're difficult to get feeding, but I think it's a solved equation because it's so many people work with them, and so many of us have that list, right? We have the freezer full of things, and we kind of know what our next step is. So
No, the mine. If we're just gonna go here,
Yeah. We'll just talk about feeding babies. We'll talk about breeding in a little bit, but yeah.
I have found this year. So a lot of people had a bad year. I had an excellent year, but it's not that excellent because half these bastards aren't eating yet. So, I have a lot of reminders of how much I suck.
Isn't that weird?
Yes. I go in and I'm like, facilitated your creation to slowly watch you die. So anyway, and I find that with Floridana, with Getula, and when I say Floridana and Getula from here on out, I basically mean all the Eastern Kings that I work with, and I work with a lot of them. I find that they're either going to eat off the rip or not eat and die unless I assist them in life. I have said on CCR many times, we don't feed the ones that aren't going to, don't want to eat. We just let them go, or, gertie. Well, when the entire mother effing clutch of OBX Kings is going to die, and you're one of 4 people that produced them this year, you kind of have to make a decision whether it's worth getting these bastards to live to keep them alive in the hobby. And I know there's more than 4 people, but I don't think there's more than a dozen people that made OBX Kings in North America this year. And so with the problematic feeders, I have found that I do this kind of, might be controversial, but I keep them all together. And then one day, Steve decides he's going to eat Sue, and then they have a meal. And so
now you have an eater.
That, I now know who's eating, and when they eat their sibling, I now have, that's a big meal because it's like a 1-to-1 ratio. That's like me eating a 260-pound steak. So I can live off that a little while. And I did this accidentally last year because I was cleaning and I put them all together thinking they're not going to kill each other. And then one totally killed its sibling. And then I was frustrated and I was like, well, the strong will survive here. We're going to Thunderdome this. And I put them all together. And sure enough, it started to work. Now you do create a monster. Once one eats a sibling.
Oh, yeah.
Get it
You're
out
my
of there.
prized pupil.
In rapid succession. But I've done that. I've tried the scenting. The thing about the Eastern animals is they want Eastern lizards. They do not. They don't want a Western lizard. And unfortunately, I don't have any lizards near me. So for me to get lizards, I've got to call people. I tell my students when they go all over the Southeast not to bring. I don't like bringing in live animals, but if you're ever fortunate enough to see a rogue-killed fence lizard, peel that thing off, shove it in a baggie, and bring it to me. And I actually have a 5-line skink that somebody found dead. I tried to make a tincture out of that. They didn't care. I bought a bunch of brown anoles. They didn't care. I tried feeding them live anoles. I tried feeding them anole tails. I tried feeding them freshly killed anoles. I tried feeding them anoles that I humanely euthanized, diced them up, threw them in the Ninja blender, and turned them into soup. And all of this stuff's, scenting. So they're just a pain in the ass. It's just at some point, something goes off in their brain, and I've done this with OPX Kings, and then they're like, oh, yeah, pinkies. Cool. It's just 10 months after they're born. So that's the problem, is you have to stay that persistent. I started to use tails. I never did tails before, but I am hell-bent on getting the OBXs to go because this clutch, one clutch that came out, they got a lot of white, which is they're just cool. And I've been hitting them with the tails, but they're not no interest in anything. They will take the tail once I get it in their mouth. I can put them on the table now, and they eat it. They'll eat it. Right? So that's a step in the right direction. But anyway, so no, I would say that they can be just as problematic as Alterna. It's just I don't think there is many people keeping this group.
Yeah.
And so you don't hear the horror stories.
It's probably outweighed by the polar opposite of that from the adults also.
Yes. Oh yeah. No.
You hear about the adults eating the lid of their tub or trying to,
that.
And it's very easy to forget that out of all these Alterna babies I have here, the one thing that gave me the worst trouble ever was a baby goini that I got in Daytona a few years ago. Went, I think, 7 or 8 months,
Mhm.
while her counterpart tripled and quadrupled in size, and she was about to go inside him, and she must have heard me, and eventually just one day was like, Pinky, same thing. She had been exposed to probably 20 different weird concoctions by then,
Mhm.
and I was like pissed off. I was like, I had extra Pinky, and I was like, okay,
Yep.
and yeah, and she just
I bred
clicked.
corn snakes this year for the Kingsnakes.
So
So-
that's a good story from me. I
Mhm.
last year I produced a lot of corn snakes. When you produce a lot of corn snakes, over 100, you're gonna have 5 or 10 that don't make it out of the egg. You'll have some that just don't make it; they hatch and don't thrive, or you'll have kinked animals. And I save everything. It's a weird thing that I think all
I do that.
herpetoculture
You
guys
got
do.
the weird freezer.
We got the freezer
Mhm.
full of everything. And so I 2 Daytonas ago bought a pair of Chesapeake, Virginia Easterns from
Nice.
Howie Sherman.
I got a
And
pair. I think.
Harry got a pair because I was all like, "You have to have these," and
Yeah,
and they had
you do.
just come out of the egg. And what you call it? I was talking to Howie Sherman, and I was like, "Hey, so these are fresh out of the egg. How do they do with eating?" And he was all, "Well, you know, they either eat or they don't." And I was like, "Are they easy?" And he was all, "No." He was like, "No." He was like, "Put them on the washing machine. Sometimes that works. I don't know." And I was like, "All right." And I was like, "So what do you sent them with if they don't want to eat?" He's like, "Half of them don't want to eat." He's like, "I don't know." And I was like, "All right, let's try this." And then I guess Harry got the ones that wanted to eat. Mine
Mine ate the day they got here and
Yeah.
have never once stopped.
Mine went 2 months, and I was just trying live pinks or frozen thawed, give them a week or two, live pink, whatever. And man, they just wouldn't eat. They wouldn't eat. They didn't even look interested. And John was over here having beers, and I showed him to him. I was like, "These are cool, man." He's like, I'm not, I wasn't like super ecstatic about it. But I was like, "They're just really neat." It was something I saw on a table, and I impulse bought them. And I've had Chesapeake Easterns before. I got on a trade from trading gargoyle geckos. And it's kind of funny. It's actually how I met John Lasseter in person. We had chatted online, and we lived in the same city. And gosh, this had to have been 2017, 2018, probably 2017. And I had raised them up, and I had put them in my wine cooler, and I cooled them, and I was breeding them. And I was like, man, these things, they're like trying to breed, but they're just doing really weird stuff. So I sent him a picture of them, and he was all like, "Hey, do you drink beer?" And I was all like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You want to have a beer?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "I'll come over and check them out, and I'll check out your collection, and I'll have a beer." So John comes over, and he's all, "Put them together." And he's all, "You see how they keep trying to get to each other's head?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's all, "That's 2 boys. Stop being stupid." I was like, all right, cool. And he was all, so I had 2 boys.
Thanks for the beer.
Yeah, I gave. I think John might. He probably still has it. He took one, and I gave one to a buddy. I don't remember. And I was like, okay, I'll try those again some other day. They're not terribly uncommon in the hobby, but they're unique. So, anyways, I got these 2 snakes here, and once again, John's over here having a beer, and he's looking at him. He's all, "What'd you try to feed him?" I was like, "I don't know. I had some like maybe a Knoll scented pinkies and some live pinkies." And he was all like, "They eat snakes, stupid." And I was all like, "Oh, I have snakes," and he was all, "Try that." So that night he leaves. I thaw out some corn snakes. I just broke a corn snake in half. I thawed it out, and they both ate. And then
Yep. Oh no, they want snakes. Yep.
and then here's the problem: they ate. So the next time I took tongs and I held a little half of a corn snake, and they ate it right off the tongs. I was like, all right, cool. And then so the next week, I mean, this is 2 or 3 weeks in, I held a little pinky on tongs. Oh shit, they ate a frozen thawed pinky, and then they became the sandworms of doom. And if you open up the tub, they came actually out, like all the way out,
Yep.
not head out with mouth open. They just came out like little like a jack in the box of Getula. And yeah, and it's well. Anyways, my buddy Gabe now has those. Good luck. They were probably the most surprising animals that were that small I have ever had. And I mean,
You scream in terror over a
Yeah.
9-inch snake coming after you.
Well,
And
I
no
have
kid-
babies from this year that do that. And it's crazy because the gamut is, I choose death.
Yeah.
To, all right, I'll just try to eat you. Like I have
maybe your food
band
even.
kings right
Yeah.
now, Pinellas County wide bands that when I go to open their damn tub, they're like 10 inches long right now. They're not big at all. they act like their parents that are 4.5 feet long, and they're just doing the whole frenetic waving with their mouth open, and anything that they make contact with, they bite.
Yeah.
And then they wrap. And so I have to actually put their little tub in the giant tub relative to the size of it, and I open and I have the tongs ready, and I just shove the pinky as quickly as I can because I don't want them to hurt their mouths because they're so psychotic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I go from that, and then I have other Floridana that I produced this year that like, nope, death. That's what I'm going to do. So
it's either I choose death or I am death.
Yeah.
Right.
I actually think I'm probably going to be getting rid of some animals because I just don't want to deal with this. I know it's kind of a loser attitude, but I don't have this in me right now. And some of those kings that aren't eating are spending the evening in the tubs with the kings that are eating, and then they're not here anymore. So that's kind of where we're at. It's very brutal in the Loughman household right now.
Yeah, it's dealing with bad feeders with Dr. Loughman.
Yes.
Waste not, want not.
Yeah. It's an interesting dichotomy in that species, right? You know, it's this whole Metropeltis mentality, and that's also not completely true. Half the time I've interacted with these animals, they're completely palatable, they're completely handleable. You get them in the right situation where they don't think food's around them, and they're fine.
Eastern stuff.
Yeah, and then sometimes it's just like that's a lot of times it's just not that.
So my kid, he's 16 now. I was raised with a father that was like, you have weekly chores. But I don't live in the wilderness to give him chores.
Yeah.
So his chore is every Sunday we go down and work with the snakes. And the words that come out of that kid's mouth when he's doing the Kingsnakes are absolutely fantastic. Like my favorite phrase I've heard when I'm upstairs is my neck. Why my goddamn neck? And I come down and there's literally one attached to his Adam's apple, like just bam right there. And it's trying to constrict him. And I was like, wow, this is happening.
As a new father who's dying for a little bit of free time with 2 free hands, I've been very, very close to putting my 3-month-old daughter in a little front harness. So I have 2 hands. The problem is I have a room full of king snakes, and I'm not starting her off like that because she's going to be wearing bites for me while I feed adult kings. And so we've been putting that off for a little bit.
She's no longer a baby in a Bjorn. She's body armor.
Yep.
Yes. She's my front plate for dealing with kings.
So anywho, that's the baby element. And then I do try what you were talking about. I guess I didn't say that. I actually start off with I just go straight to boiled. I throw them in warm water. I rub them with some Dawn. I do the whole drop them in boiling water for 7-10 seconds till they get that gross gray, and then
they stink like shit. Yeah,
I get a piece of aluminum foil, I put it down in the tub, and then I put in 5 pinkies, and I do keep them all together. Now I just keep them together, but I was keeping them together until they got to like their 2nd or 3rd shed, and then I was putting them away because at the university we found that when we kept baby snakes together, we just saw higher feeding rates.
Yeah.
And so that little bit of competition, I was like, I'm going to use anything in my toolbox to get them to go. But if they don't take the boiled pink right off the way, then I do the whole scenting thing. And if they don't do the scenting thing, then I give them corn snake chunks. And if they, then if they don't do that, we go back. Then we go to live pinkies. And it's just this kind of natural progression. I have a bunch of, I have southern hognose snakes, and those guys will only eat mice that are scented with tuna. They'll scarf down a fuzzy faster than anything with tuna water. So I thought, what the hell? I'll try this. I had 1 clutch of Belglade Floridana. That's what the trigger was for them. My falsies like the frog slurry that I make. So I threw a bunch of pinks in, tried that with some of my kings, and some of them like that. So it's just literally, I don't care what you want. Just let me know what it is, and then we're going to do that until you become, sensible and a normal king snake. So I would say that is the downfall. is 50%, 40% in my experience. Don't want to eat. Now, that being said, I am not an expert on this stuff. I'm still learning. I've not been breeding in mass by myself for more than 4 years now. So I'm always willing to hear something. We had Chad Gordon on CCR, and he talked about taking Scoloporus skin and wrapping that around a pinky. And so I have a Scoloporus that lives in the tank behind me, and I've been feeding that son of a bitch crickets faster than anything, trying to get it to like grow and shed. And it finally started shedding, and it worked. That did work. So
there you go.
So I don't know. I just think throw the kitchen sink at it, see what works. And if they don't want to eat, they meet the ones that do. And there you go.
You go to the losers bracket.
Mm-hmm.
In this Getula complex, in your experience, is it the more northern species that have trouble feeding, or does that go all the way down to the Floridana?
It is completely random.
Huh.
I made a group, or I produced Easterns last year, and they were from a North Carolina locality, and they all ate immediately. Like I'm talking. In fact, I think a couple of them ate off tongs for the first meal. But then the Sticticeps, OBX Kings, another North Carolina locality, like the North Carolina locality, no one wants to eat until they eat. With Floridana, I have Hendry County, like classic Florida Kings. They're actually Chris Montross's original pair of Hendry Counties.
Nice.
Got a clutch of those. I have a clutch of Belle Glades. Those are probably 20 air miles apart. The Belle Glades don't want to eat. Chris's Hendry Counties are scarfing down, these things are scarfing down pinks right off the rip. So I just think it's quite literally individual, and I think it's a little bit of it's just how much of that prey drive, that instinctual prey drive, is still there. I have noticed I have Dade County Brooks Kings, and I have Hobby Brooks Kings, and there is something to the domestication with the morph element. Yeah. Those Hobby Brooksii are stupid easy. The Dade counties, 50% of them do great, and 50% of them die. So I just think it's a case by case basis. I am actually having, when we're talking about them, I'm having a hell of a time with California king snakes this year, getting them to eat. I have Palomar locality, Cali Kings, the airport that got wiped off the earth. That's where I think the lavenders came from with Cali King.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I got them from Russ Gurley, and Russ was like, "Yeah, these are, they do great. They're choosing death." So, they're about to get the full gamut starting this weekend. They've been alive out of eggs now. I just had Whittier Mud Kings hatch like literally last week.
Those are cool.
Yes, and I'm going to see, like, are you going to eat? Because everybody says that they eat well. The guy I got them off of, that was the question I asked. That's actually what determines if I take on a new locality or anything. It's like, so what do the babies do?
Do these actually eat?
Yeah. Do they choose life, like, or do they choose death? Because if they choose death, I don't want to deal with them anymore. Like, I have beautiful Harris County Holbrook eye, like the speckled kings with that flame yellow and jet black. I mean, they are perfect. I produced them now 3 years in a row, and I make them to look at them briefly.
Well, those are tiny babies too, aren't they?
Yes.
The Holbrook,
that's those the problem with them. Is they're so small they can't even eat a pinky head when they come out. So anyway, so it's just it's the curse of a kingsnake keeper.
Yeah, dealing
with the babies, but I still have plenty that do eat. So I know we're focusing on the negative here, but
Mom has a lot.
Yeah. So anywho,
it's kind of funny on the California kingsnake thing. I've had years and years and years of they just eat. They're fine. That's like the last animal I worry about. And then I've got this one clutch that's just like, nah, we ain't doing that, homie. So I have found in my personal experience with a lot of these species, whether it's Alterna, I'm going to try this with the California king snakes. I got stuff that comes out. I've had Chinese beauty snakes that didn't want to eat out of the egg. Giving them just like isolation and a break for a couple weeks. With the Alterna, we don't even. I don't even start trying to feed Alterna until they're like a month old. Like it's like I might, but I usually don't. There's, I think Jason Nelson talked about that on your podcast.
Mhm.
He's like, yeah, I don't touch my Alterna until they're like 2 or 3 months old. I think he said 2 months old. And he's like, then I start feeding them. And at that point, they're so hungry, they'll eat literally anything that's moving. I feed them a live pinky. And I was like, maybe that's. And it's so funny. My California Kingsnakes are, that particular clutch, I think, is 5 weeks old. And they look like they've eaten every week since they hatched. They're fat. They're still pooping. They came out huge.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. California Kingsnakes are like the same size as a corn snake, and the eggs 2.5 times the size.
Mhm.
The babies just come out monster. And these are very palatable. They're very calm. They're not real poopy and squirmy like a lot of your baby king snakes and corn snakes and everything like that. These have been very. So that's kind of an interesting little thing. I know they'll eat eventually. Everything kind of maybe sometimes eats, and then if it doesn't, like you said, it
Part of the shit, part of the crew.
it becomes part of the cycle of life.
The other thing I did, and it's funny because I was listening to your alternate episode and realized that you do it too, is in an act of absolute desperation, as I got my holdbacks, they went into these little containers I got at Walmart, and I didn't want to keep them in a rack. I wanted them to have their own tub. And I was like, how the hell am I going to heat this tub? And then I realized that I had $1,400 worth of incubators in the garage that don't have anything in them. It's like, aha. So, threw them in there. And once I got them in there and was holding them at about 78 degrees, 79 degrees, just below 80, all of my holdbacks are just, they're ripping and roaring right now.
Yeah.
So, and I think that isolation, this could be self-inflicted. Keeping them together in one great big tub may not be the best strategy. Though I tried keeping them singly last year and it just didn't work. So anyway, but yeah, no. So this is the challenge part of the Getula group for me anyway, is this getting the young to eat. I can produce them. I can keep the juveniles, the adults alive. I tried breeding, I think it was 14 pairs, and I got eggs from 13. So
nice.
I was like, okay, got this down. In fact, that's part of my problem right now is that there's just so many of them. So anyway, but yeah, no, getting the babies to start is where the pain comes.
So are you treating all of your northern to all the way to southern to more inland all the same way for breeding?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, well, actually, no. So my garage, which I talk about on the podcast all the time, I went a little nutty trying to understand the thermodynamics of my garage. I MacGyvered the shit out of it. And so I bought Govies and quite literally made a grid for my garage and then put the Govies where the lines intersected so I could get data to then make a thermal map of my garage. This is what I do out in nature when I like studying animals in the wild. And that's when I figured out that this one corner, it can get down to the mid to low 40s if it's 10 degrees outside, which we do get where I'm at. So, but conveniently, just out in the open part of the garage where you'd put the car, and I have snakes, the lowest it will get is like 45, but it will hold right at 55 to 60. So it's absolutely perfect for stuff that lives in Florida. So basically what I'm able to do is all the Floridana, the Goinai, the Sticticeps, the Getula, all those guys, and my other kings, they're just in the garage in racks, like out in the middle of it. And then the more temperate stuff, like my Easterns, and then other snakes, obviously like Western Hognose. I have a bunch of fox snakes now too. That stuff goes in that corner. And then I go ape and I go to Lowe's and buy 1-inch styrofoam, polystyrene, and wall it all off. I had a freak out. I've got Govies that have alarms on them that send a thing to my phone. I was at work one day during one of our cold snaps. It was like the corner of the room is at 35 degrees. I was like, holy shit. So came up so I can get that thing cold. So it works out really well for temperate stuff. Cause if I need to get it cold, I can. If I just need to keep it cool, I can.
Okay.
And I think that was why I was so successful this year, because I was somehow able to, even though we didn't have a super cold winter here in West Virginia, I just think everything was perfect for me where I had a nice long brumation where a lot of people were having like a short brumation, and so everything cycled, the way it should.
Yeah.
So yeah, I told my wife, like, we're not moving. Like, we're staying in this house. That garage is my secret weapon right now. So yeah, no, that's it for me.
Yeah, I would catch hell trying to get anything that cold here, barring artificial help.
Yeah, I don't have to do anything. It's just West Virginia gets cold. January into February, it's cold. So
I did the South Texas thing, and I'm going to move my camera, and I bought a extremely expensive mini split that gets down to 60 degrees, and I'm going to build a box around it. I'm going to put another AC unit on the bottom with the cool bot and put that at 50. So somewhere between 50 and 60, I'll be able to brumate stuff. I am very blessed and lucky to be able to share brumation with Mr. Lassiter. I've said that many times. So for now, my stuff goes that way, but at some point I do need to be a self-sufficient child and move out of dad's house and try this. So I've literally got a rack right here. I'm going to build a insulated box that goes around it. I'm going to click it on, and I'm going to have a little door on one side so I could go take all my little tubbies out. And
there you go.
that was my engineering answer to it. Buy the product that instantly works and build a box around it. And I was like, all right, we'll do that. Because it does get cold here, but like for 2 days, and then it's back to 80.
Yeah, no,
that's would be the bane of my existence here. Like, I've got all these montane snake. I know this is not, old habits die hard talking about montanes on this show, but that's something that looms heavily over me. Is what am I going to do with all these things that need to get cold in Tallahassee, Florida?
Yeah,
but we will adapt.
Yeah, those Alternate and Leonis are not going to. Yeah, they want to be cold for a long time.
A lot of the Floridana stuff, I'm pretty sure they could just look out the window.
Oh yeah, you're fine.
But I still enjoy cooling them a little bit.
And I did some experiments here in this room I'm in, which is obviously not the garage. Y'all can't see it, but right over here, there's the wall of animal plastic Vivaria that I bought forever ago, and I kept some of my animals in those, and I just turned off their lights. So other tanks' lights came on, but they didn't have any heat, because I can get this room into the 60s, like upper 60s in the wintertime. And they bred. I got clutches out of those too. So I bred my Mexican black Kingsnakes that way. And then I bred two pairs of wide-banded Pinellas Kings that way.
Oh.
So I don't know if I need the garage, but that's where most of the animals are. And as long as it doesn't drop down into like 40, we're fine. It probably is fine if it drops to 40, to be honest with you, for a little while anyway.
I mean, they have to deal with it at some point.
Everything's good.
As we're one of the amazing things we're really alluding to as we're talking about, you're saying these Pinellas, Sand Kings, and we're talking about Chesapeake, Virginia, Easterns, and Harris County, Holbrook Eye, and even without calling a Holbrook Eye, calling them speckleds. One of the things that we do kind of delineate through these species is locality phenotypes, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's kind of funny that us as like herpetoculturists are kind of always looking for those localities that personify a phenotype. As you're kind of looking at that, one thing I'm always interested in asking about people that are really into kind of this section of the complex, what are the size differences? Because I found it's massively variable.
It depends. So as a general rule, I'll say according to legend. According to legend, males are bigger than females, and that definitely is true. Okay, so we'll just go there. So if you're looking for like the biggest example of a given population, you would want to look at your males. But that being said, I have a couple females here that are enormous. I have a Brookside female that's pushing 5.5 feet.
Ooh.
In fact, I get really concerned when I put the male in with her, because my male is about 3.5 feet, but that's still 2 freaking feet of difference, and she can totally eat him. Like, it is well within the realm possibility that he's done for. And he wants to get the job done, so he's not really concerned about his safety. He just wants to make more snakes. But that being said, as a general rule, Mean's Eye is the smallest of the group, and that was actually one of the characteristics that Crisco and company used in describing it, is that the Mean's Eye have a tendency to be smaller than Floridana. And at the largest Mean's Eye I've seen is actually at the university. I inherited, thank you for doing this, Jennifer Archer gave me all of her Florida Kings, which was a big morph collection. I don't know what I have because I'm not a morph guy, but there are some localities in there. And there's a 100% speckled Mean's Eye male in there that is, he didn't get the memo. He's not supposed to be under 5 feet. He's huge. So all of these things can pretty much get big is what I'm learning. As a general rule, for Eastern king snakes, well, let's stick with Florida king snakes. With the Florida king snakes, the Hernando County is a county where you get these intergrade kings, which I've actually decided that's the group that I like the most, where you've got some Getula and some Floridana rolling around in there. And Hernando County kings can get big. There was one, I think his name is Bruce, and his genes are in a lot of Hernando County animals. And he's like a 6.5 foot beast.
Ooh.
Yeah, not a small snake.
It's
so
a lot of Kingsnake.
Yeah. But I have some
That's a lot of
Pinellas
Kingsnake. Oh my God.
Yeah. Sand kings here, or wide banded Pinellas counties that are new. Also according to legend, in case somebody hears this and they're like BS. But when I heard where these animals were from, I can't remember the guy's name, but it wasn't Sunshine Serpents, Daniel Parker, and it wasn't Joe Mesa or Nasa, whoever that guy is. It's a different guy. I have a male in the garage right now that's about 5 feet for them. So he's big. I mean, he's big. So they all can kind of get to 5 foot. Mm-hmm. When you get beyond 5 foot, you're looking at a really big king snake. South Georgia Eastern king snakes are known for getting pretty damn big. Some of the Chesapeakes can get big. I just think it has a lot more to do with what you're doing to them than their actual genetics.
Okay.
Because once these guys eat, they will not stop eating. That is a thing that I have learned. I had one that it got out of my room, and I was thinking how the hell am I going to get this thing? And here again, at the tender age of 45, I stopped caring about a lot of things. So I was kind of like, well, shit, there's a snake out in the room. It wasn't that 30-year-old reaction of tear everything apart. It was just, how am I going to get him? So I took a bucket of mice and just put a plate of mice in the middle of the room while I was writing. And then I heard the plate clanking around, turn around. It was an Eastern. And he just came out on his own. And I think I put a dozen mice on that plate, and he'd eaten 8 before I realized that so
That's
when
beautiful.
you have that kind of prey drive in these animals, they can get big. They absolutely can get obese. They can get obese. I am not saying they don't get obese, but they have a pretty fast metabolism. I think they have a faster metabolism than a Pantherophis. That's my idea. There's no science behind that. I did not do any studies. I could be full of crap. But
I have not had
definitely,
if I feed the fox snakes, the corn snakes, the golf hammocks, the Japanese rat snakes I have, the same amount, slightly elevated, of what I feed a king, that rat snake's going to start to get hips, and the king's just going to be like, more food, please. And it's just going to get bulky. So anyway, so I think that size is based off what you do. This year, I'm actually doing some work with the students up at school to see what feeding regime gets you good body condition and maximum growth. And that's because I am tired of dealing with worms. I just want to get them. I don't want to power feed them, but I want to maximize potential growth. So, and what we're finding is that the magic bullet right now, you heard it here first, kids, is you give them a mouse or a rodent first, and then 5 days later, if you can, give them something like a button quail, and then 5 days later, rodent, and then 5 days later, fowl. And by alternating, they're getting all the macronutrients that they could get in nature. So you're inevitably denying them some nutrient if you only give them mice. We did mice and rat pups, and we didn't see any appreciable difference between that and feeding them just mouse to mouse or rat to rat. You know what I mean? But mouse and fowl, we are seeing kind of this logistic curve showing up. So that's kind of cool. In 5 days, not a week. And at 3 days, they get fat. So don't do that.
I was going to say, I've always heard people say they get obese relatively easily, and I have noticed that. I have not had as much trouble getting weight off of things that I've allowed that. Like I slip up, I like watching them eat, and I've probably caused some fat snakes, but I don't have as much trouble getting it off of them as I thought I would.
Mhm.
Just go a little easy on them, smaller prey items even. I
Yep.
know a lot of time, it doesn't seem to be as near as much of a problem getting them slim back down as I thought it was going to be. So I think the higher metabolism, I probably higher than I would have originally thought, just by looking at like the snake and what kind of snake it is, being a fossorial snake.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely seem to burn stuff a little bit more than I would have thought.
And in nature, all the studies with telemetry that have been done with Florida kings and eastern kings, they have about a 50-hectare home range, which is pretty big. That's like
Wow.
Pretty big.
40,
Yeah.
45 acres. And when you go out and do that kind of study, you basically, when you inevitably find the snake, one of the things that you note is like, is it moving? Is it undercover? And they're undercover 50% of the time. And to put that in perspective, most snake telemetry studies, they're undercover like 80% of the time. So these guys are just kind of up moving. And then there's been all kinds of really cool telemetry studies where people put transmitters in snakes, and then they invariably end up studying a king snake that ate their study snake. My favorite one of those that was just published. This is why Florida king snakes are the best. I challenge any other king in a duel to my Floridana, because they freaking eat the pythons in the Everglades. They had a clutch of berms, and they wanted to see where the babies were going, so they put transmitters in the babies, and then the Floridana, that look like Brookside. There we go. That are down in southern Florida were just
Floridana.
Yeah, they were eating the pythons. They had like, I know at least one ended up in a king snake. I can't remember if there was more than one, but
Wow.
So they don't care. Like, they bump into something, they try to overpower it, they kill it, they eat it, they keep going on their day. And if you have that kind of biology, you have a very active metabolism. So,
Do you think, reflecting into the hobbyist, that some of that metabolism is reflective of our care? Do you think that has to do with temperature? Is it enclosure size?
yeah, I think how you keep them. Even when I keep mine. Well, let's just go over that. The science has driven my husbandry, if that makes sense. So one of the reasons why I went to king snakes, I guess I didn't talk about, is nothing against rat snake keepers. I'm not anti-rat snake keeping.
Let's keep that to an absolute minimum, Dr. Loughman.
Yeah, yes.
Come on now.
I mean, my fox snakes are right over there. I didn't like keeping them in tubs because they want to go up. And so when I was trying to figure out, like, well, what can I keep? It's like, well, king snakes are fossorial. So I can actually give them what they, not that they're underground all the time, but they spend more time down near the ground than rat snakes do. And so I thought, well, I could definitely, do some cool stuff keeping them in rat tubs. And so I keep, doesn't matter if I have them in a 4x2x2 or a CB70 vision cage or vision tub. I just make sure I've got 2 inches of substrate, and I actually put a bit of thought into the mix. So I use ReptiChip, cypress mulch, and then I throw in aspen, and it's like a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio. And so there's a lot of heterogeneity in that mix. It's not just aspen. It's not just mulch. It's a mix. And that mix dries out enough, but at the same time holds enough moisture that they can get in it. They tunnel around. And I make sure I have that. And then I give them hides. And I bought a bunch of fake plants because the damn things just pulverize pothos faster than anything. And I lay the plants on top of each other. So, if, like, here's my hand. If you're listening to this, sorry. Another plant here, another plant here. Because when I was in the cane fields south of Lake Okeechobee looking for Floridana, I was looking at, like, this habitat that everybody talks about. And sure enough, there's grasses there, and they just bask in that. and I throw that in the tubs. I have that in the Vivaria here. And with the Vivaria, it's great because you put a light on there and they cryptic bask just the way they do out in nature. You know, it's fun to watch them because they'll go over the surface and then they weave their head down. So they're like 2 layers deep in the veg underneath the light. And so by doing that, I give them something to engage in so they're moving. Okay. That's the whole point of that diatribe. And if they're moving, I don't really have overweight kings here. I moved a lot of my gravid females up to the school to be part of a study. And the students were feeding them, after they laid eggs, the diet we feed them when they come out of brumation. And I hadn't seen these snakes for a month because it was field season. And I damn near had a stroke that all my precious high-end locality females are like obese AF right now because they were getting 2 rats a week. Like, it's bad. So I just threw them in Vivs and gave them this kind of stuff to interact with, some of them. And the animals that I brought home and did that with, they've got most of the weight off already. Now, of course, they went on a diet. I mean, they're getting a large mouse every 2 weeks now. But that's a fun thing about keeping these animals in a vivarium is that they move. Like they're not just underneath a cork bark slab. They have a pattern. They're a lot of fun to watch. The ultimate example of herpetoculture and herping coming together for me was actually with kingsnakes, because when I went out to look for those easterns this past April, I keep easterns in this room. And I did that whole thing I just talked about. And so I've seen them doing this kind of cryptic basking thing all the time. And I was walking along this trail. I was at a conference in Norfolk. And I basically said, I'm not going to the morning session of the conference, but I got to get back by lunchtime. So I had a little window to find this damn kingsnake in. And I'm walking along this trail. And I looked at the ground. And I was like, that is exactly how the grass looks. Or the bottom of my tank looks. I bet you there's somebody basking over there. And I just like walked over like a dumbass thinking I'm not going to find one. And then boom, right there, fully stretched out was the Getula doing exactly what I've seen them do. And I yelled at a very high octave and scared the living bejesus out of this family that was on the walking path at the same time. Because I started an open conversation with the kingsnake. Like, I think it was something to the effect of, I found you, you bastard, at the top of my, you know what I mean? So, anywho, but yeah, no, it was super cool. But I got a video of it kind of moving underneath the grass the way they do here in the Vivaria. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So that's another thing I love about these snakes is that you can see them doing natural. Like, if you give them a naturalistic enclosure, they'll use it. And they do cool stuff with it.
That's a big parallel to a lot of the Mexican group. As if you have a beautiful naturalistic enclosure for your gray banded kingsnake or your Leonis, you are probably never going to see that snake. They don't want to come out. They don't want to be around the light. They are going to look for the smallest, probably coolest, tightest area in that enclosure. And that's kind of one of the things we substitute in their tubs. You know, and I've talked about it. We have a hot side hide, a cool side hide, deep substrate, sometimes to where everything's rubbing on the top of the tub if it's a smaller tub and a younger snake. And it's so interesting to hear that this whole other side of the Lampropeltis group is much more active. And it would make sense. They're a more active diurnal animal. They're a larger animal. They predate on other species. I'm assuming they're eating a lot of garters and things of the Nerodia complex. And like you said, Burmese pythons. So that's pretty cool. So if somebody was looking for a king snake that they could enjoy watching as well, which I mean, you said you keep them in tubs, something like a CB70 or a V70. I think there's different names for them, but that's the 33 inch by 18 inch, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And then the big ones are all in either vivariums or I think there was an old rat company. They died right at the beginning of the pandemic. I feel like they were TRC or TUC or something like that. But they built their racks to go along with the Freedom Breeder tubs.
Okay, yeah.
And I got those racks initially for blood pythons, so they're
Oh,
big tubs.
Perfect for
And
gigantic
yes,
Floridana.
with the big windows. That's where
CB7
all
or CB90s, I think.
CB90s. That's it.
Yeah, or
And
FB.
that's
I'm
what I
sorry,
keep my
FB90 is the size.
Boa
FB90.
tubs. Or
Yeah,
little boa
that's what I
tubs.
keep the big ones, my bigger animals in.
That's a good tub size.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like I said, there's all these different strategies to keeping them. That with my ADD, it doesn't like if I want to keep them in a vivarium, I can. If I want to keep them in a tub, I can. If I want to rotate them through all these things, I can. So, they're able to hold my interest that way.
I've got to assume that nice little collection of locality Floridana or Easterns in naturalistic enclosures is probably a pretty fun thing, especially if they're as active as you're saying. That's got to be great. So, especially the men's eye, I'm a huge fan of the men's eye. I think they're just absolutely insanely beautiful. That's probably my favorite of that group.
The variability is
It's awesome.
It really hits a lot of buttons.
Yeah.
I am still a little intrigued by the 6.5 foot Hendry County Floridana Brooks Eye. You said Hendry County on the big one, right? Because my biggest pine snake is a New Jersey Jersey Giant Thomas Davis line black and white northern pine, and he's just over 6.5 foot. And his name is Tank, and that is a massive snake. So
no, they get no. Well, the thing about if you know about Getula Kings is they don't have a neck, so like they don't have that gracile thing.
It's just straight.
It's sausage
just a thug,
with a head.
They're thuggish, brutish snakes, and that's the other thing that I just love about them. Like when you look at a big Floridana, I don't care who you are, you just kind of have this like whoa.
Yeah.
And to give credence to our good friend Smitty, they are worthy of the moniker Methropeltis. So to add to that big, brutish, thuggish thing, if it's hungry, it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
It adds to their mystique.
Yeah. So kind of interesting thing I want to ask. You find these things in the wild. You found Floridana, you found Easterns. You know, they kind of have this moniker in the hobby, this Methropeltis thing. They come out flying, they want to eat. So what are they like when you find them in the wild? Do they have that same kind of...
I've not found many. I found one Eastern, and I've got two Floridana, and then I've found the two Nigra, and I think that's it. I've never been bit. I've been musked.
That's kind of a given.
Those. And their musk is bad. It's not good, but I don't care. I mean, I like Nerodia, so nothing's going to faze me. But yeah, no, they're everyone that I have handled in the wild was very chill. It's the animals in human care that were like, holy Christ. Like I have a couple that there's this thing we call tap training where you basically pull open the tub and you have a hook and you don't like smack them. You just, gently touch them with that. And I've learned that the kings, for the most part, learn that. The false water cobras, they just see the hook now and they're like, okay, he doesn't have food. Now I do have kings. Anything that's in the tub, it's grab, wrap. I'll figure out if I can eat it later. And there are some Florida kings I have that do that every single freaking time. Like I would not just open their tub and grab it. I know I'm going to bleed. Yeah. I'm going to let them bite something a couple times, then pick them up.
They'll steal my tongs. I have to have. I need a few more pairs because of that. No, I keep a lot of my stuff in lidded tubs just for the type of redneck racks I have for a few different things around here. But hey, they don't get out. But it's one of those things where you open the lid, put the end of the tongs with the prey item on there, and just slam it down and let them thump around until they get it, and then you can like open it up. I use that, and you have a window for light cage maintenance without getting murdered by this thing. Not a big window because they don't eat very slow, but gives you a minute.
Well, on this this kind of conversation, I kind of want to talk a little bit about something that Dr. Loughman is actually very, very tenured in with this species, and that's going to be the morphs. Being that this is an offshoot of our Corn Stars show, one of the things that always kind of drove me to the species, and I thought was always very special, and I have done my research, and I do know a little bit about this, Zach, so I know that you don't want to get too much into it. So through the late 70s into the early 80s, there was a couple of different morphs found in the Floridana, kind of Brookside complex. That's kind of when things, I guess, were getting muddled, maybe more in the 90s. And so there are actually some morphs outside of those. And so in the Meansai, back in the Goinai group, there is some line bred blaze phase animals. I do believe that is a polygenic trait that's been line bred for a more red animal. Babies come out beautiful red with that crazy dark patterning, obviously with that mottled patterning, and hold on to a little bit of that red and a little bit of that pink into adulthood, which is pretty cool. You get a little bit more of an orange steak than more of a pale kind of a summer evening yellow, which is kind of neat.
Static snake.
Yeah. In the Eastern complex, from what I can tell, there is an albino. I don't know if it's a T positive, T negative, but there is an albino floating around in the Eastern group. I don't know if it's pure. Dr. Loughman, do you know if that's a pure Eastern?
I think it is. I know that there have been multiple albino Easterns found.
Yes.
I just don't know if those were found by her, people that then brought them in and started breeding. There's also a lavender line of Easterns, I think, as well. But I don't think I've seen them.
And I think that would be the difference there. The T negative are just albino. The T positive are called lavender. Lavender was kind of the nomenclature used. Also, sometimes they were called hypos. It's a Tyrannese positive albino. Lavender, I think, is the right name because they do kind of have a lavender appearance. So that's pretty cool. If anybody is working with those animals, reach out. We can put it in the show notes or something. But the kind of neat one, being a little bit of a morph guy, I guess half of my collection is morph stuff, half my stuff is locality stuff, and somewhere it works, is in the Floridana Brookside group, which it sounds like to me, as best I can tell, that all of those animals were mixed and bred together with the morphs.
Yes,
for the 90s and 2000s.
There's no real. I mean, there are some recent locality-based morphs. Most of those came out of Daniel Parker with Sunshine Circus.
The Sugar Kings, I think, is one of them.
Sugar Kings are a great example of that.
Which is a true hypo in the Pinales locality. And then in that Floridana group, and I'm not going to list all the morphs, there's actually a really good website you can look up.
Yes.
And it may be something that Daniel Parker put together. I can't remember the other gentleman it was with. Literally Google Florida Kingsnake morphs, and there's a page that has everything. But
and we might as well throw some names out real quick because I am not worthy of this, even though I inherited Jen's collection, which is an amazing morph collection.
Yeah, Jen Archer did a ton of work with
Jen Archer, Scott McFarlane, and Caleb Bell, who are all from Florida. Those are pretty much the people right now when it comes to Florida and morph. And then the individual that I cannot remember his name, who's actually the guy who has that amazing website. I know exactly what you're talking about. John Sorgus, maybe. Or I might have just completely butchered his name.
Jorge Sierra.
What was that?
Jorge Sierra.
Maybe that's it.
Is it Jorge?
Yeah, I cut out there for a second. Can you also hear me?
Not John. I think I got that from the Church of Last.
I also could have just butchered that.
Anyway, sorry.
No, you're good. But I got a little chunk of information to throw out. So there is, I believe, right at 20 different morphs. A lot of it is simple recessive. I believe there is one incomplete dominant trait. I'm not going to tell you which one it is. There are 2 different kinds of albinos. There are a couple different kinds of hypomelanism. And there's a beautiful mosaics, which is a simple recessive pattern morph, which is really cool. One of the things that I find really amazing in the Floridana group is, am I saying Floridana right? Am I saying it right? Because somebody's going to text me.
Floridana.
None of us speak Latin.
There's a lot of color enhancers. Yes. There are a lot of simple recessive traits that are hyperzanthic. I believe that's the sulfur trait. And then hypererythristic, which I believe is the flame trait. And again, I'm sorry. There are different types of hypos. There is straight hypo. I believe there is a look, the people naming these morphs, right? There's like a peanut butter, there's a jelly, there's a
Jelly.
peanut butter and jelly, and then there's stuff like your Azanthic. So there's a New England Azanthic and a straight Azanthic.
I want
So
to actually talk about that one real quick.
the New England Azanthic, yes, please.
Yes, that's one worth discussing because it was almost lost. So there's the 2 lines of Azanthics. I don't remember I am not the guy to be talking about morphs. I am not worthy of this conversation, but I did find this interesting. And then at school, because of Jen's collection, which is awesome, we ran with it. But basically, the New England Azanthic, it's called New England, not because the guy that bred them was up in New England. That's where that kind of came from. And I believe that was from the 90s or early 2000s. And then there was another Azanthic line that showed up, which was a little bit easier to get. And then all the morphs started happening, and people stopped paying attention to these Azanthics. An Azanthic Florida King, as a non-morph guy, is
about the prettiest thing that holds my interest the most out of all the Floridana morphs.
They're bright white and jet black with that kind of classic Floridana pattern. So you kind of take that really whitish looking hobby Brookside look, and you just take it to an extreme, and you have the New England Azanthics. And we inherited
those, don't you?
gens that were pure, and basically we have, we've been breeding them and we've been holding them all back, and I'm basically giving them to people. Wink, wink, Harry.
I'm people.
Chris.
I'm people.
Harry's people. Harry, I got to point it. That's Harry's people.
That won't that will actually keep them going.
Won't do anything really cool. With them.
And probably do a good job.
That's a piece of herp history. That line, and it's good that it's around, and it's always been one of my favorite things. Much like you, I don't get too deep into the morph thing, but Azanthic just goes very, very well with Floridana.
Yeah,
or any Getula King, like Splendida. Azanthic Splendida are some of the coolest looking things too, but
they're badass.
But I digress.
No. And one thing that Harry, you're kind of one of the guys that's going to do this because you're going to have a similar mentality as me. Why don't we outcross that into a locality phenotype, or put it in that way? We get a little bit of fresh blood in that New England Azanthic, and then start breeding it back, or get it into the correct locality. We as hobbyists need to think about doing that, outcrossing these animals, keep them pure. And then try to have that gene saved. One of my favorite we haven't even talked about, and I think this is so cool when a species does this, because bull snakes do this, is the white-sided.
Florida King white-sides are cool.
They're real cool.
I have an Azanthic white-side here that is one of my, in spite of myself, one of my favorite animals here.
I sent that one to you, right?
No. You sent me. I think it's a ghost, or I don't.
That's right.
No, Azanthic or
what is Zach, Dr. Loughman? Sorry, what is a ghost Floridiana?
I don't know.
That's a 2 gene. Hypoanery is a ghost, right?
But they were originally hypoazanthics.
Were they? Oh yeah,
yeah.
I don't know.
So there is an anery gene in Floridana that is not compatible with the azanthic gene, even though as adults they'll look very similar. And as babies, they look very similar. The original ghost Floridanas were azanthic hypos, but then they made hypoaneries and started calling them true ghosts.
We're just going to see what it does when she gets big.
This is why I can't do the morph stuff.
Yeah.
You're trying to track a scientific thing that is referred to as peanut butter. And then another thing is jelly. And then peanut butter and jelly is a third thing. So, I just can't. I can't. Yeah. And I got a C in genetics class. So, Mendelian genetics, not my jam. Phylogenetics, evolution, my jam. So,
what are the neat things
for me?
One of the neat things we find about white sides, and from what I know, just talking to other hobbyists, the white side gene is usually a leucistic type gene. Right, so this falls into all of our leucistic type animals. We, of course, have leucistic black rats, leucistic Texas rats, but you also have leucistic corn snakes that are palmetto corns, right? But it's slightly different, but usually they have a visual het, and I have heard that the white side kings will have a visual het. I don't know, but I've heard there's usually markers on
When
them that show visual.
we breed ours here, and most of the morphs that we produce, they just go in a box straight to Clint. So if you want some
Clint knows
great
stuff,
more Florida Kings, go to Metazotics. There's my plug for my podcast, mate.
Yeah, and also, Clint's great. I did remember that website. It is Sierra Snakes.
Sierra Snakes, yes, and that is the individual that
I pulled it up after we changed the subject to make sure I was right about the name.
But that is, if you are a Florida King person and you haven't been there, it's really funny because I was throwing around in my brain after the last book, like, what book am I going to write? And I was like, it'd be cool to do one on Florida Kings. And then, of course, we have the good book of Hubs. And nothing is going to come close to that. And then I found that guy's website, and I was like, done. I can't do this.
You can't beat it.
We can always take more. You know.
Yes. So anyway.
Yeah, I would say, kind of capping the morph thing. I think that if anybody saw a hatchling, and I think I've got this right, a hypo-mosaic hyper-erythristic. And I'm sure that probably compounds into some really neat name, but they are some of the most beautiful hatchlings. As adults, they are very pretty. But as hatchlings, they are, there's not a lot of snakes that compare to that. Mm-hmm. It looks like my shirt, right? It's literally red with black. And
one thing I can say about the morphs, and maybe I should get into them more than the localities, is, we made, I think that at the university with Jen, that collection we inherited from Archer, that we made about 400 babies this year. And with the morphs, we didn't have any problems feeding them. They just ate like crazy. But my, hoity-toity locality kings just want to die. So there's something to be said about that breeding for domestication, which is what we're doing when we have a morph, whether we want to say it or not. Where basically, you already have a mutation, you better eat. And your parents probably ate and gave you the gene for eating, if that makes sense. So
I think I find that interesting, and it's a positive thing. If somebody wanted to get into these snakes, they wanted something that was visible in a terraria, and they wanted something that was neon colored and had 5 genes, like a ball python, because there are 5 gene combos out there. Check out some of the hypo ultra sulfur mosaics. I mean, there's tons of stuff out there. But I believe there's, especially with us, because we're all like the niche hobbyist nerds, there's something holistic about maintaining a locality phenotype. And really trying to maybe even refine it within that locality. Now you're to F1s, now you're to F2s, now you're to F3s. You're sticking with a locality, you're line breeding it, but you're really doing a special job of selecting. This has been done with the OBX. The OBXs are Outer Banks Kings, if anybody listening to this isn't familiar with your Outer Banks. And now you have these really special, not that they weren't before, but you get these really special, like you were saying, you have some that were real high white. You get different speculations. They go through an amazing, this is another thing. These are, as far as I know, the most dramatic ontogenic change of all the king snakes. All of your Mexicana goes through some. California king snakes go through a little bit of one, especially like your grease kings. Anything that has like a melanistic trait to it really gets darker with age. But the Fordana, the Easterns change a little bit in color, but the Fordana change in pattern, in color.
They change a lot.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Watching a Brooks Kingsnake go from hatchling to adult is pretty wild.
It is really wild. The other thing is with the localities, when they're babies, you can see some subtle differences, but they are subtle. Mm-hmm. Like if I have if a locality gets out and another locality gets out, and now I found a Hernando and a Pasco, this does not happen. I've talked a lot about snakes getting out tonight, but it's only been like the literal handful of times it's happened.
Who are you, Justin Smith?
Yeah. I would have a hard time in hand being like, that's the Pasco baby, that's the Hernando baby. If they were the juveniles or the adults, I could tell you like that.
Yeah.
So they definitely go, there's a consolidation in phenotype at birth that then goes to a unique phenotype literally like 2 months after they're born. If they're eating, you can see it. Now the wide-banded Pinellas that we keep talking about, they come out and they definitely have a different look than pretty much all the Floridana that I've made, which is really cool. And I think Brookseye actually have a different look than all the others.
A little more red, kind of.
Yep, they got the red
way.
and the infamous chains are gone. It's just this kind of. It's not like a Speckled King, but it's
like a saddle.
Yeah,
almost kind of.
It's really cool.
Do you know? So a lot of times we see a yellow rat is a great example. You have a small animal that comes out very, very tiny. It's heavily patterned. It's highly banded. It spends a lot more of its time being an arboreal animal hiding in tree stumps. We seem to think that that kind of base gray color, and I say we like I'm absolutely fucking anybody in this hobby or in herpetoculture or in herpetology like my, but in herpetoculture, from the papers that I've read, they seem to think that these kind of monocolored, higher patterned animals are that way because they're living in trees, they're living in stumps, they need to diffuse their pattern more, and then as they get older, they get more of some get very bright, some get very dark. Look at a black rat snake compared to a yellow rat or a Everglades. I mean, oh my gosh, very difficult to tell these snakes from babies, similar to what you're talking about. But then in a year, you're like, oh, well, I know which one every single one of these things is, and a lot of that coloration. Again, using this word moniker we, but I'm nobody. It seemed to thought of their vegetation around them. The general habitat they have, and that's why that coloration is the way it is. Do you think it's the same in kings, even when they're so close to each other?
So a neat thing about the Florida king snakes is there's this idea that one of the things that drives the decline where the animals in southern Florida are so light, and as you go north, they darken up, has to quite literally do with the substrate they're on. So when you're down in Dade County, down near the Keys and the Everglades, basically where the Brookside were from. That's all kind of limestone, relic, coral reef, otolithic stuff.
Yeah.
And when that breaks down, it breaks down to a white colored dirt or sand or soil. As you go north in Florida, you still have that limestone. Like all Florida is a giant chunk of karst cave land in the middle, and then some sand from the ocean on either side, but you get a lot more organics. And so the soil changes coloration to a more of a dirty brownish gray. And as you go north with that soil exchange, you can lay the phenotypes of Florida king snakes right on top of a map. And you see that the kind of classic phenotype matches the background of the soil.
Wow.
So yes, is the answer, because they want the bulk of their pattern to match that bulk of substrate. And then all the crossbars and everything, that's actually an adaptation so that when they move, it's very hard for mammal eyes and bird eyes to focus on pattern moving. That makes our retinas and our brains not work well. And so it gives them just half a second. This is all being done for half a second.
Yeah.
So that the blue jay, when it lands and it's like, oh shit, baby snake, and the little king snake slithers for a second, the blue jay loses track of it, and then the snake can get away. So if you're dark on a light background, you're going to die. And if you are light on a dark background, you're going to die. So
I like that example a lot.
They match the color of the dominant substrate. And when they do the genetics, like Brookside does not clade out at all. There's no, and unfortunately, this is the same thing that's going on with the OBX Kings. I really wanted OBX to be a thing. It's not. But it's that exact same story. When you get out on the coast, you don't have soil, you have sand on top of sand with some more sand and some sand.
Yeah.
So that's why the OBX Kings consolidated on a pattern that's very much like Floridana, because Floridana are living in a sand-dominated substrate with patchy bits of grass. And so evolution is going to select for that phenotype in that type of environment. And that, like what I just talked about, that's why I love king snakes. Because there's a bunch of nerdy science with these damn things, and I can keep that in a box and see it, and I can go out into the field and see it, and both times I see it, I'm happy.
So we could take a little. I'd like to take a little bit of a venture into the OBXs.
Sure.
I kind of find that as one of the most unique of all of this group. They live on a barrier island, right? In a relatively small range, right?
Yeah.
It's long, but it's small. Do you know when was that recognized as a species? I know that it's fallen off now.
OBX kings were recognized, I think they were recognized in the 50s. And it was an example of a herpetologist caught one and was like, this is different.
Yeah.
Went back to the museum and named it. Like, that was it. And we can see the pattern. Everybody knows about the pattern.
Yeah.
And the pattern is stunning. And they are, even though I've got 20 of them that want to die, I'm not giving up on them. They will be one that is in the collection forever. They're not getting the boot. But anywho, they were not just described because of their pattern. They actually have a morphological difference, which is they have a smaller head relative to their body, and then their rostral scale is very Pitchophis-like. They have a rostral scale that does what pine snake rostral scales do, at least in the holotype or the type series, where it's cornified and comes to a little rich. Now, my OBXs that I have here, I have 2.2 from 2 different lineages. None of them have that on the rostral scale. I've held their little heads and stared at it, trying to see this infamous rostral scale. Didn't see it. I have seen OBX kings that are in jars at the North Carolina Museum. Conveniently, the herp collection and the crayfish collection are right next to each other. So it's I can lose months of my life in that space. Not days, not hours, like literally months. And I've looked at every single Stictoceps that they had. And I have seen finally this last trip, like a couple weeks ago, actually, I did see this thing that they were talking about. But they have that smaller head. And you know that, like, you have a Getula, a mainland Getula, you can feed, that's 3.5 feet long. You can feed it a small rat. If you feed an OBX a small rat, it's going to take it like 5 freaking hours to wolf it down. They do not have the head and jaw structure. So I understand why when we were doing morpho taxonomy, people looked at them and were like, oh, yeah, no, this is different. But now all we know is it was just simply an isolated population that hasn't had that much genetic drift out on the barrier islands of the Outer Banks, and that's it. And the other thing that's neat about them is you can't collect them off the Outer, and we should leave them there. But if you get there in the right time of year, according to Herper legend, they're actually not that hard to find. It's just your classic. You're going out there and you're flipping garbage like you would for kings in South Georgia. But no, Outer Banks kings are very special to me. My family has been going to the Outer Banks since that's a huge tourist destination. If you're from the Mid-Atlantic here, where I live, there's Nag's Head, Kitty Hawk, Kill Devil Hills, Buxton, Avon, like all that stuff. That's not where these guys are. The Outer Banks kings are on the southern barrier island of the Outer Banks, not the northern, but they do make it just barely onto the northern Hatteras Island. They're just south of this town called Buxton. But that's just a response to that environment. It shows their phenotypic plasticity. But you can get that pattern on the mainland, and you can actually get that pattern on the mainland nowhere near the Outer Banks. Herpers in North Carolina, about once every 5 years, the running joke is somebody finds an Outer Banks king in Raleigh. Like, so
they find an Inner Banks king.
Yeah, or Winston-Salem, or somewhere where you wouldn't expect to see them. That pattern also randomly shows up. I think it's shown up in Georgia, and I think it's shown up in South Carolina, in addition to the Outer Banks. But OBX is where it's consistent. Like once you get out there, you just see it in snake after snake after snake after snake.
That's awesome. And I've also heard it's a really pretty place to go vacation. Like you're saying, it's a really typical.
Now, if you go herping there and you get in those marshes and it's like May, you're going to be, every bit of blood in your body is going to be sucked out by the mosquitoes and the no-see-ums and the horse flies and the yellow flies. It is a very, very buggy place because it's a salt marsh. But just wear a long shirt, long pants, you're fine.
Grow up, be a man.
Grow up. So,
Well, awesome. So Zach, Dr. Loughman, sorry.
you can call him Zach. The Dr. Loughman stuff can end. We don't need to do that.
When you're telling little Timmy why this Eastern group of king snakes is the best king snake, what's that final answer on it? What is this is why? You talked about why you loved him, but why is this the snake for somebody else to get into?
I don't know if I would talk to little Timmy, because this is the way I explained it to one of my students and he liked it. Okay, because we're gonna use a beer example, and I'm not gonna talk to little Timmy about beer. I mean, maybe, who knows? So to me, and this isn't meant to be in any way, shape, or form derogatory, the Montaigne Kings, the Mex, the Greer Eye, the we don't call them Thayer Eye anymore, Leonis, Alterna, like those are like
the Lord Snakes.
Lord Snakes. Those are like IPAs. Like one's a hazy IPA. Greer Eye's like a hazy IPA, and Alterna is just an IPA.
So good old base IPA. Got it.
Yeah, a little bit pinkies out, an acquired taste. You have to have a certain palate to appreciate an IPA. I think IPAs taste like rotten piss. I don't like IPAs. I just like Yingling. I like Rolling Rock, maybe a Bud Light, a Busch Light. That's to me what the Getula Kings are. They're just like the standard issue, easy to keep, always good Kingsnake.
The Busch Light of Kingsnake. You heard it here first.
Yeah,
they wake
I
up
have
in the
never
morning,
been
they
more
piss
proud.
Excellence.
So like they're just fun to keep. Now, granted, I like a good amber, a nice wheat beer. Like that's kind of my thing. I've got the genes, so every IPA I taste literally tastes like it makes me gag. But there's something nice about consistency. Yeah. And once you get them past the eating thing as a young animal, like Alterna are easy to keep, but if you get them too wet, they are going to get funky. Something's going to happen. You get a Getula King too wet, it's happy. You get a Getula King too dry, it might have a bad shed. It's still going to eat everything you throw in front of it. So there's this kind of nice element to them where they're just dependable, and that's what I like about them. They came to me in a time in my herpetological career, herpetocultural career, where I just needed that, and they saved the hobby for me. So there you go. And that's why I would say Getula Kings are cool and the best.
I'm gonna open an IPA.
There you go.
You get your
Alterna afterward.
You get your murder snake fix without having to bleed too much.
Oh yeah,
they are murder snakes 100%, and that's it's wonderful. Yeah. But they kind of have the bumpers on a little bit. Like I would rather have a 6-foot Brooks come out of the tub at me than a big ass obsoleta or something. That that's a different level of damn it.
And that's another thing that Harry brings up. I like that they're big. I don't like dainty little animals. Now granted, they don't have to be big. If you feed them the right way, my locality kings, most of them are about 4 foot.
Yeah.
But then if I want to have a 6-foot monster, I can't. So
very quickly, I've got a couple Brooks that happen too.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's my burden to bear.
Yes. So that is why I like them. I'm a basic pragmatic kind of guy, and they fill that niche for me beautifully. But I can do interesting, unique things with these animals if I want to. So
I've also got to assume that along the king snake realm, kept at a lower temperature, 78 to 80, these things can probably also go a long time without eating. Right? They're genuinely bulletproof.
They are genuinely bulletproof. Yes.
The Pituophis, regardless at what temps we keep them out, I keep a lot of mine at 78, 80, right? I found that they excel at that in my collection, not the same as other collections. Go 2 or 3 weeks without feeding one. You are visually going to be able to tell. And I feel like with king snakes across the board, That's just not the case. They're fine.
They're forgiving.
I work in periodic fastings during the summer. So like if I'm gone, I do my research schedule and my vacation schedule, and I try not to be away from home more than 5 days at a time, which means I can feed them every 5 days or fine. But if I've got a big long vacation, I just literally can book into the feeding schedule for the animals. Like, all right, here's a fast. And granted, when you open the tub after that time period, it's interesting. But they're not dead, and it's probably good for them to metabolize a little bit of the extra weight and everything. So,
sure.
But yeah, no, that's the thing. They're the Rolling Rock bush light of snakes.
It's a bush light of snakes.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here first. I love it. Zach, thank you so much.
Get on it, Smitty, with the t-shirt.
just a little bit of meth, a little bit of bush,
a little bit of meth,
a little bit of domestic violence, and here we go.
They're the natty light of snakes.
Yeah.
I pitched him an idea for Lamp Peltis using the Miller Lite logo. The new one just says light. You're gonna have lamp on there. So I don't know. Maybe this will be the kick in the pants for him to make me my t-shirts.
Yeah, but no, that's what I would say. And that's why I was thinking about this actually. Like, why do you like these damn things? There's so many, and so many people don't like Getula. I mean, let's just get the elephant out of the room. There are definite people that are like, hell no, those things are batshit. But deal with it.
Yeah,
that's all I have to
exactly.
Say. You need a little bit of excitement in your life. Get a Brooks King.
It is
Put your
always
hand in there
good.
after you've handled about 6 mice and see what happens.
Let me tell you what, more hand washing goes on while dealing with my collection than probably any rat snake keeper with a similarly sized collection ever. It's just to and from. Like I could stand to have a sink in here because my God, there's certain things, especially once you get to know your adults and stuff and know your collection, you're like, not that one. I'll be right back. I'll be right back. I'm gonna walk across the house and go squirt some Dawn in my hands before I pick that thing up.
Is a quick pop defensive bite from one of these guys. That's nothing.
Yeah,
but when they are biting because they think you're food, and if they get you good, and there's some jaw pressure there. It's not just a quick bite. Like you get them halfway off and they're like, no, and they get back on. Like
and they do that thing where it's just constantly tighter, just constantly.
They use their entire strong body to push their mouth onto you. It's not even the face because or neck because there's not much of either. It's just the body pushing its mouth onto you and not giving up.
My conjuncta, which are these beautiful tiny little Baja California king snakes, used to be their own species. Now they're squished. And they're tiny. They're 3 foot, right? They're these little tiny king snakes that hatch massive. And Zach, you actually have some.
Yep.
And they're not big. And I've had one almost consume a trash bag, right? Like, just keep your eyes on them when you're cleaning them. I don't know. They have a lot of that.
Well, like I said, one gets loose in your room, just put a plate of rodents in the middle of the floor. That's all you got to do.
Yeah. That's kind of fun. If it ever happens, I'm very lucky. I'll knock on wood. I have not had anything ever get loose in 22 years of keeping. So, well, that's not true. I've had day geckos after I open an enclosure go fucking batshit, and then they teleport. They're just all right. Well, let's deal with that later. But
I've had means I take my entire finger, and despite me actively trying to wrestle them off, just continue to gain ground, and it goes from being let me take this is whimsical to 30 minutes in going, man, this is really fucking up my day. Like
this is
real quick.
Yeah. I did. Oh man, just because we're telling stories, I know we're about to close up. I had a Kankakee bull, a beautiful Kankakee bull, and I was just rapid fire. Not usually with my Pituophis when it's feeding day, when the mice are in the room. It's when they're sitting on my little rolly cart, and I've got all my little rats thawed out. I usually open with a hook and I throw them in. Right. They usually don't come out, but they do that thing where they snap, grab, go to the back. And I'm doing that, and this, oh man, it was afternoon. My wife was out, and my kid was eating dinner in the other room, and I just started opening and throwing them in with my hands. And oh man, I opened up this boy's tub and I threw the mouse in, and he just missed the rat. It was a rat, and because he was about 5 foot at this time, and he got my finger. I think it was my middle finger, and he got it, and Pitchophis instantly start eating. They eat so fast.
Just start working those jaw. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he started just instantly eating. So I pulled out, and I've got the snake on my finger. I'm like, all right, I'll get it off. So I kind of grabbed him to start working him off, and he wrapped up both of my hands. And so I was in a group chat with John Lasseter and another buddy. So I FaceTimed him because I was like, wait, I really don't want to hurt the snake. So I've got my finger up and I've got my hands stuck like this, and I'm just like touching buttons, and my kid's screaming and yelling, and there's blood running down my hand. And so I was like, all right, how do I do this? And so John, I don't think John answered. My buddy Austin, who's on the alternate episode, answered. And he was all, just stick his head underwater, right? He can't breathe underwater. And so I popped on my sink, and I was like, just stuck him in there. And he
waterboarded them.
He popped off, and it was so funny because I had a pretty serious cut on my finger, and I'm holding the snake in the hand, and the snake acted. It wasn't still trying to eat me. It was like, what, bro? I'm sorry, like. Let's just chill, man. And this is a snake that I would put. My daughter at the time, I think, was 4. I'd put the snake in her hands, no questions asked, and it was just that one feeding response.
Yeah,
that's not what Getula do.
No.
When it's time to eat, they are just going to eat, and if you get them off, they are going to continue to try to eat. And then when you set them down, they're going to eat the thing next to them. And when you put them back in their tub, if there's not a mouse, they're going to eat the thing next to where the mouse should have been.
I just use tongs. Like literally, there are tongs everywhere around me.
I have very long
got to the
tongs
point where I can open the tubs with a hook. It's like I'm working venomous, for Christ's sake, when it's feeding day.
Yes,
so I open with this, put in with the tongs, and they oftentimes will go up and then down. Like if they miss the rat, they're still going, and then they make contact with the lip of the damn tub, and then they're on it.
Yeah.
And I will literally leave their tubs open, move to the next one. But I've had them like try to eat the tub for 30 minutes. And there's just no hope. But yeah, no. Inanimate objects. But I've also gotten to the point now where I can show them the rat in the air. They hit the rat, leave the tub, and as they're falling down through the air, I can grab them with the hand I'm using the tongs with, and then just put them back in the tub and push everything.
They're pretty much occupied at that point. Once
they have the rat, you're good.
I've ill-advised. I've used that as time to like spot clean. Sometimes I can just get them by the tail.
Totally.
Redneck wind chimes, and just pick them up, do a few things.
Redneck wind chimes.
Yeah.
I mean,
Harry, I think you brought up a good point, and I do want to get in on this. Spot cleaning. Spot cleaning is something we do with all of our animals. I have found that, I will say, California Kingsnake, Splendida, Holbrook Eye, all of this group are like the least grossest poopers, in my opinion, that I've messed with. Like, they're not like Pitchophis. They're obviously not like Drymarchon. Even some of the Mexicana have messier poops. I've kind of noticed that the kind of this group of snakes we're talking about don't have that like disgusting crap. Is that the same with these larger animals?
Floridas can get gross.
Okay.
Yeah. I find they tend to do more damage to their bedding with regards to their water bowls than maybe pooping, or it could just kind of be a little bit of a mixture of that. But they if they feel like they need a little bit of a humidity spike, they will just shoulder that water bowl and deal with it.
And one neat thing I found is that I have like 8 to 10 Splendida. There's a bunch of them down there. And when they go to the bathroom, their crap actually dries up.
Yeah.
Much faster. Like you can tell that thing evolved to live in a desert because it is
releasing way less of its moisture.
Liquid it can.
Yeah.
Whereas the Floridana, they have liquid everywhere. One thing we didn't talk about, which I think is an important thing to note with Florida Kings in particular, is they have to have water. They will desiccate faster than any large rodent-eating colubrid on Earth. I actually lost two of my Florida Kings during brumation this year and their water bowls dried up. And I check them every 10 days. I don't want to bother them, but I fill up their water bowls, and it was just a freak. Yeah. We had a warm-up period in January where it got like to 70, stayed there, came down, and the water evaporated for unknown reasons. And they went during brumation, they lost their water, and that's why they died. Like they were snake jerky.
Yeah. Wow.
And so now this year I'm going to be pretty manic about checking water bowls. I mean, I don't want to give the impression I didn't. I just was shocked that it took that short a period of time in winter. And I've had babies in the past where if they tip their water bowl early and I don't get to them in a week, they've dried up. So they definitely need water.
I've had that problem with Scarlet Kings as well, which would track, being from here.
Mm-hmm.
But they desiccate, especially those little babies. There's not much to them.
Yes.
It just, yeah.
So water as important as food with them.
Yep.
Whereas my Splendida, I mean, Jesus.
They get it from the rodent. And
I was about to say a lot of these desert species, especially the Getula, assumedly Getula complex, kind of California Kingsnake, Splendida. And we're not talking about the Western stuff today. I know I keep bringing it up because they have similarities.
You really can't help it.
Well, they're great. They have these very decent poops, right? Like it's really, really interesting.
Yeah. Anywho.
Yeah, absolutely. Zach, thank you so much for coming on. This is an episode we've been wanting to do. We've actually been trying to make it happen for a little while.
I want to say something quickly. You all talk about in the THP land, the superior this, the superior that. This is the superior colubrid podcast for THP land.
Nice.
So I will say that.
You heard it here first as well, folks.
So keep them coming. This is now tied as my favorite. So
okay.
The 2 episodes you put out, I love them. I just listened to Alterna prepping for this, but the Leonis episode, y'all are dangerous because I swore off Mountain Kings. I was like, there's no way. And I had 4 Leonis that I was looking at and tracking on Morph Market, and then I had to be like, no, after I listened to that. So
I'm going to send you the one you need to buy.
And he keeps sending me. He hasn't sent me anything, but he will bring them up. Good work. This is a good one. So,
wow, this is a good one as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And we have more episodes planned. Again, it's kind of a scheduling thing. Harry just having a baby, me working.
Yeah, it probably falls on me with getting a little bit of 2 armed moments.
Just get them out when you can.
Yep.
Yeah. There you go.
That we're not under a bunch of pressure for it. And there are going to be some more Corn Stars episodes. That's another thing that we're going to be working on. But yeah, we'll love hearing that. I think the next thing we're going to try to do is a little Mex episode.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. Do a little more talks with John and get that going. But this podcast is brought to you by Black Box Cages. If I could ever say it right, ever. What are the superior caging options out there? There's a lot of good ones. They're one of the great. I highly suggest everybody take a look at their website. They are now producing the FB90 equivalent, which is me and Jake did the math, and by that I did the math, and they are about 13% smaller in volume than an FB90, and they are awesome. They got the V28s, the V70s, the XR20 is one of the racks that I have from them, and it's a great size. They also do a lot of beautiful display enclosures. So if you want to go with a cube or a 3x2x2, they obviously have different heating options. They also do a lot of stuff in white, which all of my stuff is black, and I kind of wish I would have went white. And now kind of seeing that, it's pretty awesome. But yeah, give them a check out. Also, don't forget THN24. That's the Herpetoculture Network 24, but it's THN24 for a little discount when you check out. Got to lock that in. Don't forget about Fulvius Apparel, my man right here wearing that hat. I do have the Flipping Tin hat on tonight because I do love Jake and Sky's show, which is another great show.
They should be wrapping up another one of those awesome episodes there.
Yeah.
Right now, I would imagine. Well, no, it's a little early.
It's a little early for them still. But yeah, check out Fulvius Apparel. A lot of great options going on for clothing, hats. I think he's also going to start doing some child clothing. I'm not sure. And also Silent Hill Reptiles, JT and Mindy, doing a hell of a job breeding their corn snakes. Again, like I said, we're going to be doing some more Corn Stars episodes, kind of just working them in as we can. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. Once again, Zach, thank you so much. Harry, thank you so much.
Thanks
I
for
know
having me.
Harry, your time is valuable right now, and I know you're not getting a lot of sleep. So
This is a release for me. I enjoy
Yeah.
it very much. I get to sit
Cheers.
down and talk about snakes, man.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, Justin is going to shut us down, and we are live until he says we're not.
Time to go get a bush light.
Go
There
get
you
that
go.
bush light. So we are still live until Justin shuts us down. One of the interesting things about this network all being on the same thing is that Justin has complete control of to when we start and when we're done.
He's in his